I was just reading an article that says sugary food makes you fat. I mean, that's silly, right? We all know it is oily food that makes you fat.
Well, I'm sorry to inform you that while oily food does make you fat, so does sugary food.
Seriously? How?
I'm sure you remember that sugar has glucose as its monomer and glucose is stored in our body.
I do. Glucose is stored as glycogen in our body.
Correct. And how about all the extra glucose like those you get from all the sugary desserts? How are they stored?
As glycogen, right? I'm sure it cannot be starch for animals, and I don't know if there's any other way to store glucose in our body.
Alright, keep in mind that besides glycogen, excess glucose is always converted to triglycerides or simply TAG, which is stored in our fat tissues.
What is this TAG thing?
It is simply a molecule produced in a transition stage after which the excess glucose gets converted to fats.
Wait, what? Glucose can be converted into fat? Isn't that a bad thing?
No. Don't jump to conclusions so quickly. It is only high levels of triglycerides that are bad for us. So bad that it can increase the risk of heart diseases.
Heart diseases? Due to this TAG? My grandpa often complains of chest pain and he has such a sweet tooth. Is this TAG thingy taking a toll on his heart?
Well,
This TAG sounds like a Trojan horse. Can you tell me more about it?
okay. You're worrying too much. Let's learn about it first. Do you remember what lipids are?
Lipids are biological molecules that are mainly made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
How about their solubility?
Lipids are insoluble in water but soluble in alcohol.
Correct. In the AS and A levels, we will come across the following types of lipids.
Wow, I only knew that fats and oils are called lipids. I didn't know there were so many other types of lipids.
Yep. For this lesson, we will only focus on two types, triglycerides and phospholipids. Others will be covered in later lessons.
Okay, that'll make it easier.
Let's start with triglycerides. They are nonpolar and hydrophobic in nature. Being nonpolar means they possess no net charge in them.
Okay, and I'm guessing that the hydro in hydrophobic means water, and phobic means fearing. It means that triglycerides fear water, so they are not soluble in water?
Correct. Let me now expand on that.
Sure.
Triglycerides are made up of two components, glycerol and fatty acids. To make a molecule of triglycerides, one molecule of glycerol combines with 3 molecules of fatty acids. Like the formation of disaccharides and polysaccharides, this combination also takes place by condensation reaction. The condensation reaction occurs between the hydroxyl and carboxyl groups. All the 3 hydroxyl groups of a glycerol combine with the 3 hydrogen atoms of 3 fatty acids, releasing 3 molecules of water. The bond in the newly formed triglyceride is known as an ester bond. So, there are 3 ester bonds in one molecule of triglyceride. The triglycerides can now be viewed as having 2 components, the head and the tail. The glycerol makes the head and the fatty acid makes the tail.
I noticed a letter R in the fatty acid. I'm pretty sure it is not an element. So what does that represent?
That's a good catch. The R in the fatty acid represents a hydrocarbon chain made up of hydrogen and carbon. The carbon and hydrogen in the hydrocarbon chain are often so many and repetitive that it is tedious to write them all. And when they are all written down, they give triglycerides a bulky look as seen here.
You're right. That's a chunky molecule. By the way, the word tail for the fatty acid now looks a lot like a tail. But why is the last hydrocarbon tail in the second picture bent?
Finding this helpful? We have additional learning resources to offer. For Cambridge IGCSE and AS A-level subjects.
So, Shall we get further into the bent structure of the hydrocarbon tail?
Of course.
Look at it carefully. Do you notice the double bond present there?
Yes, there is a double bond between two carbon atoms in the last fatty acid chain.
This double bond gives a kind of mobility to the fatty acid, so they are not rigid. And, based on the presence of such double bonds, the fatty acids in the triglycerides are of two types, saturated fatty acid and unsaturated fatty acid.
New terms again, teacher? Please elaborate.
Sure. Saturated fatty acids are those in which there is an absence of double bonds between carbon atoms in their hydrocarbon chain, while unsaturated fatty acids contain one or more double bonds in their hydrocarbon chain. If it contains only one double bond, it is called a monounsaturated fatty acid.
Interesting.
Now, can you try to figure out what a polyunsaturated fatty acid is?
Sure. If there is more than one double bond, the fatty acid is called a polyunsaturated fatty acid.
Good. Here, now have a look at its structure with its double bonds.
So, what difference would it make if it is a saturated fatty acid or an unsaturated fatty acid?
That's a very good question. Fats and oils are fundamentally triglyceride molecules. Fats have saturated fatty acids in them, while oils have unsaturated fatty acids in them.
Wow. Never knew that before.
Now you do. The physical state of fats and oils is a result of the difference in the type of fatty acids present in them.
Wait a minute. You mean fats are solid because they have saturated fatty acids, while oils are liquid because they have unsaturated fatty acids in them?
Exactly. That's a good analysis. As saturated fatty acids do not have double bonds in them, they are rigid and straight, and so fats are solid in nature. On the other hand, the oils are liquid because they have double bonds in their unsaturated fatty acids that give them mobility.
So that's what those double bonds do. Speaking of oils, I wonder how sunflower oil and olive oil are so different from each other if they have unsaturated fatty acids in them.
Good question. Remember we talked about the two types of unsaturated fatty acids? Olive oil mostly has monounsaturated fatty acids in it, while sunflower oil mostly has polyunsaturated fatty acids in it.
I get it now. One more question. Why are margarine and hydrogenated vegetable oils almost solid like fat? Is it even natural for oils to be solid?
Well, vegetable oils are naturally liquid, but the unsaturated fatty acids in them can also be artificially converted to saturated fatty acids.
Does it mean that the double bonds can be converted to single bonds?
Yes.
So what do they do to change it? Do they break the double bonds?
In a way, yes. The double bonds are broken and hydrogen atoms are added to it to convert them to single bonds. This process is called hydrogenation. Can you guess what impact this process will have?
Hydrogenation makes the hydrocarbon chains fit closely together, as they have single bonds. The oil then becomes solid as fat.
You got it.
This hydrocarbon chain of fatty acids seem to work wonders. What if they get broken?
Why would you imagine them getting broken?
Well, I guess because they are called tails and are quite long, it is probably easy to break them.
You're not wrong to think of breaking down the hydrocarbon chain, but let me put it this way. Do you remember if the reaction of condensation is reversible?
Yes, it is.
What is the reverse reaction of condensation called?
Well, we studied that in carbohydrates. It is called hydrolysis.
Now, think of the same in the case of triglyceride. What will the hydrolysis of triglycerides result in?
During hydrolysis, the ester bonds between the glycerol and fatty acids will be broken down to produce a molecule of glycerol and 3 molecules of fatty acids.
Do remember, what you explained is a case of total hydrolysis of triglycerides. A partial hydrolysis produces less than 3 molecules of fatty acid.
Noted. Teacher, Is it the hydrocarbon chain of fatty acid that contributes to the overall functions of triglycerides? They're quite diverse in their structure.
You're right. Let's have a look at how the structure of triglycerides contributes to their functions. The insolubility of the non-polar hydrocarbon chain and the high proportion of carbon and hydrogen make triglycerides suitable energy reserves. It's due to their insolubility that they do not interfere with the osmotic property of a cell. Next, when triglycerides are totally hydrolyzed, they produce glycerol and fatty acids. Fatty acids have a high proportion of carbon-hydrogen bonds. During respiration, these bonds between hydrogen and carbon react with oxygen and release energy, carbon dioxide, and water. The energy released is much higher than that from carbohydrates. Thus, the water produced can also be used for hydration of cells. So, triglycerides also act as the metabolic source of water. We will discuss the release of energy from fatty acids in more detail in later lessons. Triglyceride, when stored below the skin, acts as an insulator against loss of heat. It also provides buoyancy, especially in sea mammals like the whales that have blubber, a lipid under their skin.
Register now for free.